Greetings and salutations, friends. My name is, of course, Charles Q. Banks, and I'd like to welcome you back to my series of discussion videos in black and white, in which you can actually comment and suggest what topic you would like me to talk about, and I will create a discussion video on that, most likely, depending on what you suggest. But you may be wondering why I'm wearing goggles, what's with the goggles, and the answer to that is I have a headache, and these are the best sunglasses that I have at the moment to deal with the light, because the light is hurting my eyeballs, because I'm a vampire at heart, apparently. That or a mad scientist. Mad scientist vampire, that's what, yeah. Anyway, today I will be talking about FMA-B, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and FMA, the original, again, because apparently I took Jared Mithrandir's comment a little bit out of context. He was saying that people thought that Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is an abomination, and I took that to mean like a biblical abomination, like the abomination of desolation in Revelation, the book of Revelation, which, you know, that's mad rhymes, but that's not what he was talking about. I was thinking moral. He was thinking quality-wise. A lot of people seem to prefer the original FMA, and I am not necessarily one of them, but I can understand why, I think, at least in a couple of ways. He mentioned that Jeff Thu of Mother's Basement, a very popular YouTube anime analyst, I guess? Yeah, I'll call him that. He stated that he prefers Brotherhood overall, but that the first few episodes, or at least I think the first like 10 or 11 episodes from the original Full Metal Alchemist anime, which came out in 2002, were better because it set up a lot more the rest of the story. And in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, you're kind of expected to already know what happened in the first 11 episodes of Full Metal Alchemist. It's made for people who wanted a more strict adaptation of the original manga, and it completely fulfills that. But if you're only watching Full Metal Alchemist for the first time and you watch Brotherhood, you will be left in the lurch. Watching the first episode is completely confusing because it doesn't explain hardly anything in the first, like, 10 minutes. It's just a bunch of action in the middle of the storyline. You don't know any of the characters, and there's just, you know, tons of explosions and things. So in that way, Full Metal Alchemist from 2002 is actually better, because it goes way more in depth on everything that happens in the first, I think, few volumes of the manga, and Brotherhood kind of finishes off the rest of the anime, the rest of the content in the manga, with the content that's in the manga, whereas in about the 11th or 14th episodes, Full Metal Alchemist from 2002 goes off the rails with its own story. Like, they knew kind of where the story was going up to a certain point, but they just had to create a whole bunch of original content that the manga did not have. The writer was writing the manga at the same time. It was not a finished manga. When Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood came out, it was 2011, and the manga was completed. So they could actually go back with a lot more funding from Full Metal Alchemist and the mangas, and create a much perfected version of Full Metal Alchemist according to the manga. And the same thing happened with Hellsing. Jared mentions Hellsing and Hellsing Ultimate, saying that he prefers the original Hellsing over Hellsing Ultimate. And I did too, actually. Hellsing Ultimate did the same exact thing happen. Hellsing came out in 2001, the anime, which same time period as Full Metal Alchemist, and the first, like, anime season of Hellsing did somewhat poorly, because it definitely went off the rails in the end of the manga. Was not adapted to be strictly adhering to the manga story, because, again, same thing. Writer was writing it, they didn't have the ending, they had to create their own ending. And the one thing I prefer about Hellsing, as well as, well, about Hellsing in particular, is that it was not as edgy as Hellsing Ultimate. Not as violent, not as bloody, not as sexual, even though there was a little bit of sexual content. It's a mature show, much more mature than even FMA. And so I have a lot of moral issues with Hellsing, but I actually did really love the original Hellsing anime. There's a lot to it that I love, and both those, as well as like something like Trigun from the 90s and Lovely Complex, all of these anime have something in common, which is they're in the sweet spot, I would call it the sweet spot, between original cell animation and like digital animation of the 2000s. So between the 90s and 2010s, animation was in this weird spot where it was trying to discover how to use digital animation properly. And a lot of shows like Hellsing didn't use it very much. So it has a much more grainy look to it, hand-drawn. Same thing with Full Metal Alchemist, very grainy. It feels more like a 90s anime than a 2000s anime. Whereas Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, when it came out in 2011, and it's just like digital perfection, which some may not prefer. It's a very subjective issue, but I personally prefer the old anime style. Not necessarily the designs of Full Metal Alchemist. I think people's faces look way too round and unnaturally round, unnaturally so. Their eyes all look like thin snake eyes, well, snakes don't have thin eyes. But anyway, they have thin eyes in FMA, and I don't like it. I like the traditional round, giant anime eyes. It's kind of ironic, seeing as I have gigantic round goggles. Anyway, so yes, I completely resonate with that. The preference for older anime in general over newer anime. And Hellsing Ultimate goes crazy with the blood and guts. And so I definitely prefer the original. And yeah, there's a lot that the original Full Metal Alchemist did, or like the Nina storyline, that was a one-off episode in Brotherhood. And it takes like 4 episodes for what happens in Brotherhood to happen in Full Metal Alchemist, and it happens completely differently. The original Full Metal Alchemist had a much more dark, disturbing way of showing that storyline, and it was absolutely traumatizing. I don't want to spoil it, but watchers beware. It was emotional. I know someone who just went to pieces after that episode, that series of episodes, because it was just so sad, so crazy. So yes, that's what I have to say about that. There's a lot more to say about it, but I think I'll keep this simple and just end it here. Although I will say that Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood has a much more focused storyline. Full Metal Alchemist is just crazy. You can tell, like, I've done a little bit of writing myself, and the way that I wrote, and the way that most teens write, and teen fiction authors, is they just, as they go, they write as they go. They don't really plan out, and you can definitely tell that FMA did not have a goal or plan or end game for the show, and it's just like, what if it was this guy's doppelganger that was made into a philosopher's stone, and that's how the homunculi were created? Why don't we justify that with this whole storyline with a totally new villain which never showed up before, and we'll make a new monster out of the combination of all of them, and blah 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 blah, and like all of this stuff that really doesn't make sense in the storyline, but is very interesting and very creative. Same thing with Hellsing Ultimate. They took the Nazi storyline, took everything like offensive out of that, and recreated it with like a more Egyptian death god creature that they just have a big fight with, and that's the end of the Hellsing anime. So if you are okay with a lot of the way teen fiction is written, just from scene to scene, who knows what'll come next, you know, you'll be okay with this. The writing is much more stodgy, sketchy. It's very sketchy. The story is very sketchy. That's a good way to describe it in FMA and Hellsing. But I don't know. I thought Brotherhood was a lot better written, more contained, self-contained, and it really well explains everything that happens in the show and explains the world to a startling degree, whereas Full Metal Alchemist ends, I think, really poorly. There was something really cool that they did in which they actually visit our world in another dimension, which is like, what? Okay, that I guess that makes things good, but why is that happening? So yeah, those are my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, farewell.